Good morning. Hey, my name is Ty. I'm one of the pastors here at Grace Point. We are glad that you're here this morning. A couple of quick things before we get started. We have a marriage class tonight. So if you're a married person, we would love for you to come to that. It's 5 to 7 at Mojave High School. Be there or be square. It's going to be awesome. Okay? And then also, men, we've been gathering at the Aliante Library on Wednesday nights. Any guys who've been there, raise your hand up really high. Okay, been a bunch of you there. Great. We've got 2 more left, and if you're like, you know what, I'm new here, I haven't been to this yet, make sure you come this Wednesday night at the Aliante Library. You will not lose out. If you come there, we'll be super glad that you'll be there. So please come to that. Well, we are continuing our Manifesto series. Now, this whole series we've been walking through since January has basically been Jesus' famous sermon called the Sermon on the Mount. It's found in Matthew chapter 5, chapter 6, and chapter 7. Well, last week we concluded Matthew chapter 5. And so you think about going on that from January to now, that's been a lot of information that we've covered. And the idea that we've said over and over and over about this Sermon on the Mount was, this was basically a declaration of what it means to follow Jesus. When someone were to say, I want to follow Jesus, I want to be a Christian, I want to be a disciple of Jesus, Jesus like, great. This is what you're signing up for. If I'm going to be your king, Jesus your king, then this is what it looks like in my kingdom. So in chapter 5, let's give a little bit of recap of what we discovered. We discovered primarily, we've been using this theme over and over during the series, that Jesus came into an upside-down world to turn it right side up. That's why when we hear these sermons week after week after week, and when we read this Sermon on the Mount, we're like, that just sounds bizarre. That just sounds weird. Well, the reason why it sounds so weird and so bizarre is for so long we've lived in this upside-down world, it seems normal being upside down. And when Jesus comes in, he's like, no, because of sin and the brokenness and the hurt of the world, I'm going to turn this right side up, and this is what actual life is intended to be. And so that's what we discovered on week 1 to kind of launch us into all this. We saw also these things called the Beatitudes. Remember those? Blessed are the blank, for yours is the kingdom of heaven. Or blessed are it says, blessed are you. And we see that when we embrace this blessedness, which is actually weakness, then Jesus makes us strong, and we really start to become alive. And then also, and I think it was week 3, we discovered Jesus gives us some identity statements through chapter 5. He says that you are the salt of the earth. It's a compliment. He says you are the light of the world. And so he wants us to be the salt and light of the world, to change the world around us. We learned in that week that we have a choice. We can either change the world or do nothing at all. And so Jesus has given us identity to go and change the world. And then Jesus makes this transition where he starts to talk about the Old Testament law, the law of God, maybe the 10 Commandments in the Old Testament as well. And we see that Jesus completely fulfills the Old Testament law. We see that we're lawbreakers, that even in our heart we break God's law constantly, but Jesus kept it perfectly on our behalf, which is just amazing, unheard of, but that's who Jesus is. And then he goes on for the past several weeks, we've been describing all these wrong interpretations of God's law. And he would start out with these phrases like, you've heard it said. And like we live in a world where people say, well, you've heard it said, and the Bible says. You've heard it said that Christians say, what might not be true. And what Jesus was clearing up a lot of these wrong interpretations. He let us know that anger is equal to murder, that lust is equal to adultery, that marriage is a God thing, that marriage is from God, and it's actually a good thing, that our lying, when we don't tell the truth, actually rejects the good news, the gospel of Jesus. And then the last couple of weeks, we learned that a really difficult truth, that Jesus tells us to love our enemies. I mean, how hard is that? Love your enemies. They want to slap you on one cheek, guess what? Give them the other one. They want to make you go an extra 1 mile, guess what? Go the extra mile. They want to sue you and take your shirt, guess what? Give them your jacket as well. It says to love our enemies, that we retaliate with grace. This is what we looked at in chapter 5. Now, Jesus is moving us here. He's moving to our religious life. Jesus has been talking about our morality and our heart of morality and what we look like with God. He's been talking about that. Now he's going to talk about your religious life, your spiritual walk, your journey. So he's going to be hitting us right in our devotion to him, or maybe another word we'll look at in just a minute is piety, and what our devotion to God looks like. He's telling us that we are to have a secret religion, a secret righteousness of our heart that flows from us. Jesus is going to go right after the heart. He's going to say your motives matter. I don't know if you knew this or not, but the Christian life, being a disciple, a follower of Jesus, is not a flashy thing. Now, I know maybe you've seen on TV where it looks very flashy. But let me tell you that the Christian life is it's not very flashy. It's not supposed to be this flashy, outwardy kind of thing to a certain degree. There's a story of a Jewish rabbi. Now, a Jewish rabbi is a Jewish teacher. This is several hundred years old. This story is called If Not Higher. It's about this old Jewish teacher, this rabbi, if not higher. There was once a beloved rabbi. He would disappear every Friday. Unable to find him anywhere, the devoted villagers boasted that their rabbi must ascend to heaven every Friday and talk with God. So, I mean, they loved this rabbi. This rabbi had a great reputation. One day, however, a newcomer came to this small village and heard the stories and scoffed. Pfft. It's like, people do not ascend to heaven. He mocked. I'll tell you what, I'll find out what he's doing every Friday. So the next Friday morning, the newcomer crept into the woods by the rabbi's house. He quietly watched the rabbi rise. He watched the rabbi say his prayers. And much to the onlooker's surprise, he saw the rabbi dress in common peasant clothing. So a rabbi would usually wear a nice garb that people would know he's a rabbi, but he put on poor people's clothes. The rabbi then walked into the woods, and he cuts down a small tree and cuts it up into firewood. Then the rabbi carried a bundle of wood to a shack in the poorest section of the village. An old woman and her sick son gladly received the bundle of wood for next week's, fire. They thanked the anonymous woodsman, unaware that he was the rabbi in disguise. And so the skeptical newcomer got to see all this. He was deeply moved by the rabbi's secret goodness that he became one of the rabbi's disciples. He followed this rabbi. Now, whenever the villagers say, on Friday mornings, our rabbi ascends to heaven, this new follower of this rabbi says, if not higher. The secretness of our faith, the secretness of our walk is what Jesus is going to talk about. I mean, let's be really honest. We're not like that, are we? I mean, there's not a lot of secretness to us in our culture nowadays. Imagine if we were that rabbi and we lived in our culture in our time period, especially with social media, Facebook and Twitter. Here's what we would do if we were that rabbi. We would say, getting up early in the morning, smiley face emoji. Sharpening my axe, winky emoji. Middle of the day when we're cutting wood, breaking out of sweat, busting my back, smiley face emoji, wink, or whatever that looks like, or hashtag working hard, or whatever that looks like. See, our hearts are not naturally like that. And what Jesus wants to do today is kind of put our heart in check when it comes to being very outward about our religion. Now, we got to walk a fine line today because Jesus wants us to be outward with our faith. He wants us to share the gospel. He wants us to do good work so people would glorify God. And he wants us to do those things. But we got to get to the heart of why we do what we do when it comes to the religious realm, our spiritual walk. And that's what Jesus is going to talk about today. Our motives matter. We began this series out when I said 3 things are going to be big in this series. Jesus matters. You can't be a Christian without Jesus, and yet we try it. And I said also that motives matter, and Jesus is going to go after motives. So if you got a Bible, we're going to start chapter 6 of Matthew. If you don't have a Bible, that's okay. We put it on the screen for you. Matthew is the first book of your New Testament. We put the screen up there for you that shows the scriptures that we're going to use today. We also have free Bibles out back. We'd love to give you, so if you're new here, you don't have a Bible, just grab that thing up. You don't have to ask for it, just take it. And then also you'll find this on YouVersion. It's a Bible app. Type in Grace Point Vegas, you'll find it on there. But Matthew chapter 6, starting a new chapter, verse 1, and this is what Jesus says. I'm going to read through it. We'll go to the big idea, and I'm going to walk through the verses, okay? Real simple today. Verse 1, chapter 6. Beware. That's how Jesus starts it up. Beware of practicing your righteousness before others in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. Thus, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. But, and so he's saying, don't do this, but when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. All right, so Jesus starts off with this whole idea of secret giving, this whole idea of stealthy spiritual life. We got to find that balance. We got to talk about this and look at this today. Here's the big idea. Every week we want to give a big idea and kind of pull from the text what the main point of this text is talking about. Here's what I believe this text is talking about today. The main point is this, big idea. My heart matters to Jesus. We don't want it to, honestly, because we all, if we got really honest, know our hearts. Our hearts are a mess. It's hard to do anything pure-hearted. I have heard people say this before. You know what? I'm not going to serve there or give there or do this there until my heart's completely pure on it. Guess what? If you wait till your heart is completely pure on anything, you'll never do anything. And so we want to remove our hearts from this whole thing, but Jesus is like, no. I want your heart. That's the exterior. Oh, that's easy. We can modify our behavior and all that. But Jesus is like, no. I want the heart. So the big idea is this: my heart matters to Jesus. Now, over the next several weeks, Jesus is going after these 3 signs of religious piety. Piety is basically this: your outward reverence for God. It's basically because of my relationship with God, here's what my devotion looks like to Him and to the world around me. And so that's what He's going after. And these 3 big signs of religious piety throughout His culture and our culture as well was this: giving and serving to the needy and poor, prayer, and fasting. Those are big signs of being religious, or being spiritual, or following God. And so Jesus is going to go after the heart of this. And we'll see this for the next several weeks. Now what Jesus is doing here is giving us a warning about it. He starts this text out with saying, beware. And look back at it again. Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people. He says, beware, watch out. Whenever you read the Bible, read from Jesus or read the Bible anywhere, it says caution, warning, beware. You see a lot in the Bible. Just know this. You have a tendency to do what they're warning you against. That's why it's there. Anytime you read beware or warning, I have a tendency to do exactly the opposite of what they're telling us not to do. That's what's going on here. I mean, we do this with our kids, right? Hey, kids, don't throw rocks. Or hey, kids, don't climb on the car. We tell our son, he's got this big thing now about climbing on the car. He thinks it's like Spider-Man. He sticks to it and climbs on it. Well, it got him the other day. He was on the windshield. I walk out in the garage. Son, get off. I told you, don't get on the car. You're going to get hurt or you're going to hurt the car. All of a sudden, someone, I won't mention who, accidentally slammed his fingers in the door while I was holding onto it. He is screaming. I was like, I told you, son. I warned you on that. So Jesus is telling us, warning. But notice in the text, he says that we practice our righteousness before others in order to be seen by them. In order to be seen by them. Jesus is addressing the fundamental need in every one of us, the desire to be noticed. We all have a desire inside of us to be noticed, to be affirmed. We want people to look at us. You can't deny it, but we all have that. You don't believe me? You ever taken a kid to a swimming pool? Daddy, watch this. Daddy, watch me do a backflip. Daddy, watch me do a front flip. Daddy, watch me do a cannonball. Daddy, watch me do a gainer. Daddy, watch me do a belly flop. And then you get multiple kids going on, and then it's like, Daddy, you weren't watching. I'm going to do it again, and over and over and over. Take and put a kid on a trampoline. And we're like, well, those kids, and we love watching our kids do that kind of stuff. It's awesome. But we're like, well, at least we're not like that. You're not? You always want people to watch you. That's the heart and soul behind social media. A little narcissism there, like, look at me kind of deal. That's what it is. I don't know if you knew that or not, but we all have this desire for this affirmation and praise. Don't deny it and don't minimize it. But we have to understand and come to grips with the need inside of us for that is too huge for our human solution. What we need to be affirmed and to be accepted and this applause, whatever it is we want to call it that we're looking for, is too big to be met by human beings. It's too big. You know why? Here's the reason why. It's going to be big for some of you. Like, oh, that makes sense. Your heart is a leaky bucket. Think about it. People pour in their affirmation, their adoration, their applause, or their approval of you, whatever. It lasts for just a little while, right? It feels good. Like it's a good thing, and we should praise one another. We should encourage one another. But it just lasts for a little while, right? And all of a sudden we need more, and then there's just not enough. But we need some more, and so we'll go searching for it, go looking for it, and try to find it. And the reason why, there's a hole in the bottom of our bucket. And the only way to get that healed is Jesus. See, Jesus is the only one to truly satisfy your heart. Jesus is the only one that will give you that true affirmation. Jesus is the only one that will give you that will fill that God-sized hole, void inside of you. Jesus is the only one. Why? Because some of us try to fill it with everything else. That's why we want to be ambitious, and being nothing wrong with being ambitious, but that's why we want this job turned to this job, turned to this promotion, all that, because we think it's going to make us feel better, think it's going to give us more affirmation. That's why we want more stripes on our arm half the time. That's why we want all those things, because we think this will be the one thing that fills me up this time. If I get that relationship, if I get that status, if I get that money, that job, whatever it is, it'll fill the bucket up then, but yet we fail to realize there's a hole in this bucket. There's a big hole in it. Only Jesus can satisfy. It's funny that even in this text right here, you'll see over and over on the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus keeps pointing back to who? His Father. He keeps pointing back to his Father's love. Even in these 4 verses right here, Jesus mentions the Father twice. He's trying to push back into us and push back into us. Look, only God's love is what will really satisfy. You need to trust Daddy. You got to trust Daddy on this. That's what he keeps pushing back to us. Now, basically, this first verse is kind of the intro to the next 2 or 3 sermons we'll have here. In chapter 5, Jesus has been talking about our moral righteousness. Now he's going to talk about our religious righteousness. He's saying basically this: be careful not to make a show of your religion. Don't make a show of your spiritual journey for others. See, what we have a tendency to do is to put on a show. We have what we call around here compartmentalizing our life. We have a public religious life and a private religious life. That's kind of what he was talking to and addressing here. That basically our public religious life is our gathering here. Well, I go to church and I raise my hand when we sing the songs, and I put my money in the offering, and I serve. I do all those things because that's my public religious life. But what about your private religious life as well? Your private walk as well. And this is what Jesus is saying. There shouldn't be a discrepancy between the two. They need to be consistent. How you are here, be here everywhere. Not to have it kind of a split dualistic life. Why? Because your heart matters to Jesus. Now, for some of you who've been around with us for a while, or you know the Bible pretty well, you're probably kind of, or you're a gotcha person. A gotcha person wants to read the Bible or find things from the Bible and to find the problems and the contradiction in the Bible. Like, gotcha, there's a contradiction there. And so you hear this whole idea of Jesus talking about this secret private life, but didn't he say something in chapter 5 about letting your light shine before men? I mean, isn't there like, okay, Jesus, do I let my light shine before men? And he says that your good deeds may be seen by others. So Jesus talks about the chapter before, let your good deeds be seen before others. And now he's saying, hold up, don't let your good deeds be seen before others. What is Jesus talking about? Is this a contradiction? Or, I mean, what's going on right here? He commands it in one place and prohibits it in another place. Why is Jesus doing this? Well, Jesus knows our hearts. I believe he knows that our hearts will fall into 2 gutters. You know what a gutter is, or 2 ditches. That we won't stay on the path, that will fall off. And I believe when he's talking about letting your light shine and your good deeds shine, he's talking about watching out for the gutter of being a coward. Because that describes a lot of us in our walk with Christ. If you're a follower of Jesus, sometimes we cower down. There's times that we should talk about Jesus, and there's times that we should share Jesus, and there's times that we should have good works kind of displayed out there for people to see, for God to get glory. There's times that it's right there for you, but yet we will not because we're cowered down. And Jesus says, no. Your identity is you are the light of the world. You are my beacon in this world so people will know me, is what Jesus is saying. So don't be a coward. But the other ditch, the other extreme that we fall into is vanity. And that's what he's talking about right here, that we want to kind of make it all about us. My religious life is all about us, where people can see that I am very pious and I am very spiritual and all those type of things. He's like, no, don't do that. He's like, that when that's the nature of your heart, you need to hide your religiousness. You need to back out of it. It's funny, I like what A.B. Bruce says, old theologian, said it like this. We are to show our good works when tempted to hide, and hide our good works when tempted to show. I don't know about your heart, but that's the way my heart is sometimes. And so we are to show when tempted to hide, and hide when tempted to show. Good works shine for others so they would glorify God. We need to have private devotion with God as well to glorify God. Both are headed to the same direction. It takes wisdom to know when do I hide, when do I show, what does this look like? Both the end result is God is glorified. That God gets the weightiness of your life. That's what he's talking about right here. But then Jesus, he starts this warning off about being a hypocrite, being hypocritical. Deep down inside of us, there's a hypocrite. I mean, that's kind of what all Christians are called, right? I don't know if you've lived outside of these four walls here at church on Sunday morning at school, but if you didn't know this, here's some news flash to you. We are known as hypocrites. We are. And guess what we are? Hypocrites. We are. But you know what we should be? Repenting hypocrites. Because our walk doesn't always match our talk, and our talk doesn't always match our walk, and we want to be confessing and repenting hypocrites. We want to be recovering hypocrites. We want to be one-faced to everywhere we go and everyone we talk to and everyone we're around. We want to be one-faced, but the world knows us as hypocrites. Well, Jesus says in this text, there is a reward for hypocrisy. Like you would think, like that gets rewarded? The Bible says that hypocrisy, you being and I being a hypocrite, gets rewarded. Look at verse 2. He says, thus, when you give to the needy, so basically when you have some kind of religious works of some sort, some spiritual work, he said, sound no trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly, I say to you, they have what? Received their reward. Now, this giving he's talking about right here is called almsgiving. It's basically giving to the poor. Almost every religion out there practices almsgiving, giving to the needy, giving to the poor, giving to people that really, and serving people that really need something. Those are great. But and notice here as well, we don't want to pass over this. It's expected. You notice he didn't say if you give. Look back at verse 2 again. He says when you give. And what Jesus is saying, he's assuming, okay, Christ follower, you're going to be a follower of Jesus, a Christian, a disciple of Jesus. He says when you give. He doesn't say if you give. When you help people out, when you serve people, when you give to people, when you do those things. So we have to make sure, like this is basically standard Christianity, giving of ourselves. We give because he gave everything to us. And that's what he's talking about here. When we give, it's a normal part of our lives. Jesus talks about something here. It's pretty funny. Jesus is funny. I don't know if you realize this or not. Like, Jesus is a guy you'd want at your party. Like, you're throwing a party at your house. You know, you don't want a killjoy there. You want a guy who's like, this guy's funny. Jesus cracks a lot of jokes. Jesus uses a lot of idioms and different things like this. And this is one of them. It's a joke. I think this is Jesus being funny. He talks about these hypocrites trying to be religious. Now, a hypocrite was an actor or an actress. And their whole role, if you know anything about acting or being an actress, your whole role or goal is to impress an audience to where at the end everyone stands up, bravo, and throws flowers at you or whatever that looks like, win an award or, an Emmy or whatever that looks like. That's the goal of an actor. And he's like, the hypocrite is basically an actor. Now, when Jesus talks about this, he's talking about being generous and giving. He's like, but just don't be an actor about it. Don't be false about it. Don't be fake about it. He gives this idea that in this whole text he's going to show there's three ways that our heart can be motivated as we give. And number one, we could be like the hypocrite right here. We could be an actor about it. It's all about getting the applause of others. It's all about other people seeing, so it makes a big deal out of me. The second thing is we can do it secretly. We can be a giver secretly or server secretly and all that, but it's all about me applauding myself. That it makes me kind of pat my hand on the back at a boy, and it makes me feel good about me, which is not wrong to feel good about yourself, but it's all about me congratulating myself. Or the third way, which Jesus is trying to push into us, is to do it for God. That our serving and our giving is for God. It's our faithfulness to Him. It's our joy and our desire to see the kingdom expanded. It is our delight to see other people come to know Christ. It's everything in us. We want other people to know, if you're a Christ follower, what you know about Jesus, and that they would follow, love, worship, adore Him as well. He said that's the pure heart. But what Jesus is going after right here is the people that wanted other people's applause, the hypocrites. He was referring to the Pharisees. Now, we talked about the Pharisees quite a bit. They're the kind of the religious people of the time, the uber-religious people. And what they would want to do is when they give to the needy, give to the poor, they would want everyone else to see this. They want their buddies to see this. Like, man, he is awesome. They want the people that were not their friends to see their great example they were doing. They wanted this to be a big deal. Jesus even talks about them caring more about people than about God in John 12:43. It says, "For they love the glory that comes from man more than the glory that comes from God." Their quest for approval was killing the heart of their giving. It was just a public performance. And what Jesus is doing here is like let's be honest, Jesus is being a little bit sarcastic. Jesus is kind of poking a little bit of fun. It's kind of like this. So imagine I'm a Pharisee, and it's time to give my money. Before I would give my money, I would bring out the band, and I want everyone to know I am about to give money. Thank you very much. And so, that's silly, man. I'm sorry. And so but like you got to look at this and be like, Jesus, you're a funny dude. Like you have to. And like Jesus, that's exactly what he's saying. It's like you're coming out here playing the Kentucky Derby, whatever, and like, okay, I'm going to give my dollar. And that's it. He's kind of poking fun at that. But we laugh at these Pharisees and kind of like, make them an object of our poking fun at or whatever. But like we're the same way. We are the same way. Because we want to blow our own horn, right? That's what we call it. Whenever we do anything, we want to make sure everyone knows about it. Even when it's good, spiritual, gospel-centric things, we want to toot our own horn about it. I mean, as a pastor, I live with a weird, it's just weird being a pastor. Let me just tell you that. I get around people, and they don't know me, and we talk about all kinds of stuff, and ask me the question, what do you do for a living? And then I say, well, I'm a pastor out here. Well, one, it just gets awkward because they're thinking about everything they just said to a pastor. I'm like, it's cool. It's all right. I didn't record it. It's fine. God heard you. Don't worry about me. And two, typically, the resume comes out. Oh, yeah, man, I went to church back in, I think it was 2006 during an Easter or something like that. But, yeah, church is cool. And, I give, to the needy people. I think I gave a couple bucks to the guy on the 15 and Craig ramp. I do those, I'm a good person kind of deal. I start to get everyone's resume. And what is literally happened when that happens, and we all do this. We get out and toot our horn about, look at me. I'm pretty awesome. That's exactly, we do these things. See, what Jesus is telling us to do is stop fishing for the compliments. Stop dropping those hooks in the water. Because, we say those things because we want people like, you're amazing. You are God's gift. Way to go. Turn around and let me pat you on the back. That's what we laugh. That's what we want. Our heart desires that. Don't minimize it and don't deny it. That's what our heart wants. Jesus says, don't look for that type. He said, that's what the hypocrites do. Don't be a hypocrite. I love what Charles Spurgeon, he was like a preacher pastor a couple hundred years ago. He said this, to stand with a penny in one hand and a trumpet in the other is the posture of a hypocrite. I mean, the hypocrite was first an orator, like a speaker, communicator, and second an actor. The word was used in that time period figuratively as anyone who treats the world as a stage. This world is my stage. And they would trade their true, real identity for a false one. That's what an actor does. They were no longer themselves when they begin to act. They would disguise themselves. They would wear a mask impersonating someone else. This is not a problem when you're on a stage. It's where it belongs, is on a stage. The problem exists when we go off the stage with a mask on. We have stages that we live on in life. We all do this. We have home stage, church stage, the work stage, school stage. And what happens is typically we take one mask off and we hang it up and like, okay, it's time to go to work and put that mask on, or it's time to go to school. And for a lot of us, it's time to go to church. And I love you, and I'm trying, my heart is, here's my heart, man, I'm just going to put it out. My heart is this, I want Grace Point Church to be the messiest church around. Like, people are, like, really messy. Like, sin issues and problems and conflicts and all, that's what I want. I don't want a clean church where everyone's got it together and everyone comes in a nice suit and tie. If you have a suit and tie, I really can't see. If you have a suit and tie, I'm not talking about you. But where everything is just, you know what I'm saying? Just that neat and tidy and clean to where, like, how you doing? Fine. And everyone answers fine. What if we came into church like, how you doing? I'm a mess. Like, it's just a mess. That's my heart desire. Why? Because we can deal with that. Like sin is not so big that God's grace can't handle it. And so, like, I just want to put that out there, that we don't need to wear a mask, that we can be real with one another. Your real is going to scare some people. It's okay. You take off your mask and it's going to happen. Be ready. But like our heart desire, I'll speak on behalf of all the elders of Grace Point Church. Our heart desire, just be honest. Please don't wear a mask here. Please don't wear a mask here. We all do not have this all figured out. The guy on the stage is a mess. Like, we're all a big mess. Like, that's what we all are. So let's be a mess together. Let's revel in God's grace together. Let's love one another in community, and let's go and be a mess out in this community and just really love people well, okay? So that's what's going on about this whole false, hypocritical activity. And when we have a mask for our religiousness, we have a mask for church, our religious activities, and I'll take it even a step further, our Christianity becomes make-believe. And for some of you today, that might be it. You're trying to fake it till you make it. And it doesn't work in Christianity. Jesus made it for us. We trust him. And we're a mess. And God's cleaned us up, and we're under construction. We got under construction ribbon all over us. Jesus is doing a work in us. That's a good thing. Sanctification is a good thing. But we don't need to shy away from that. We don't need to become actors. And a lot of time that acting is, I think what Jesus is talking about right here is for the applaud of others. We don't want to be weird at work, and we don't want to be weird at school. And so we want to blend in with everyone else. So they'll applaud us as being normal at least. And Jesus is like, okay, cool, you got your reward. You got your reward. That's all you get. That's it. He says this in verse 2, at the last sentence of verse 2. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. The word have there is a financial word, that you have received your payment and your receipt, you're good to go. That's what he's saying right here. See, Jesus is making it very clear that we cannot live on two stages. He wants us to live on one stage. He wants us to live for God and his glory and not the praise of others. And when we live for the praise of others, guess what God does? I love you. Come on back. That's the grace of God. Come on back. Like, see, it wasn't that good of a reward. Come on back to me. Let me, Jesus, be your reward. That's what he tells us over and over and over. See, at the end of the path of a hypocrite, human praise does not satisfy because we have a leaky bucket. And for some of you, you get this. You're getting this. You're starting to understand this. This is something we talk about at Grace Point over and over and over. Jesus has to be enough. Jesus has to be enough. Why? Because your bucket has holes. That's your heart. See, when we don't get this applause, when people are not looking at us, when we really want this, it leads us to bondage. It really does. We can't get enough. We're left disappointed. At worst, we begin to demand this applause from other people. We begin to resent others when, why don't they notice me? Why don't they give me the respect I'm due? Why don't they give me the acknowledgement for all this hard work and all these things I do for them and all these hard things I do at church and all these hard things I do at work? Why don't they do these things for me? And what happens is you forgot you have a leaky bucket. I think this is what Jesus is talking about. And so our hearts want to pursue the spotlight and say, I want to do the big things. A lot of us, our prayer is, God, use me for big things. Please, God, use me for big things. Put me in the spotlight. Put me up there, God. I want to do this, the big things. And God's like, okay, can I trust you in the little things? No, I don't want the little things, God. I want the big things. Jesus is like, I'll give you the big things. Can I trust you in the little things? I like what Francis de Sales said this. He was like a spiritual director back in the 1600s, kind of like a pastor. He says, great opportunities to serve God rarely present themselves, but little ones are frequent. We'll just want to pass those up. Why doesn't God give me more? Because he cares about your heart. He cares about your heart. That's why he doesn't give you more. He cares about your heart. He wants to know how your heart is. He doesn't want you to miss the point behind it all. Jesus doesn't mean that we just supposed to hide all our good deeds. He's not saying that it's wrong if other people see us do good things or hear us do good things. I mean, it is good for us to set examples. See, in 1 Timothy 4, he talks about setting an example for other believers as well. It's a good thing. It's a good thing when we help people out. It's a good thing when we invite that single mom over and feed her and help her. It's a good thing we invite those college students over. I'm trying to help you out, college students, when they're really poor, and to feed them and take care of them. Just trying to help you out. It's a good thing when we serve at the rescue mission. It's a good thing when we serve Easter baskets to these kids for Club Christ. It's a good thing. But if it's all about us being seen by people, it's all about us getting the accolades, Jesus is like, you're taking a good thing and making a not good thing out of it. That's what he's seeing at. Jesus is going after that. Jesus is going after us being seen. No one really sets out to be a hypocrite. You didn't wake up this morning and be like, man, I really want to be a hypocrite today. See, that's the thing about being an actor. Actors are good. Oh, man, some actors, not all actors, some actors are good. And they can convince other people, and I think sometimes when we act so much, we convince ourselves. We deceive ourselves. And I think that's what Jesus is talking about. What we have to understand is we are not performing for other people. The world is not our audience. We treat the world like it's our audience because all of us have this nature inside of us to take all of our work, all of our efforts, and walk into this arena of life. And within this arena is our parents, and we look at them and say, is this good enough? Can I get your applause? And our peers, is this good enough? Can I get your applause? And our Christian brothers and sisters and everybody, and we say, is this good enough? Do I get your applause? When deep down inside, that's not our audience. We live for an audience of one. And here's the caveat. Here's the beautiful thing about it. If you're a follower of Jesus, you have his approval already. And so you don't have to go through life saying, Daddy, is this good enough? Is this good enough? Daddy, is this? No. God looks at you like, oh, yeah, it's good enough. Why? Jesus. Jesus was good enough. He sees Jesus in your place. That's like, Ty, you say that every week. We need to say that every week. That's good news. That's totally good news. We perform. It's not even perform. We are for an audience of one. Our worship is for God alone. I've seen this before, and if this is you, I'm not picking on you, but I've seen people get into worship gatherings, and, you know, songs on, they're singing to Jesus, beautiful, and then they do this. Click. I didn't see it on your profile. Probably not even Facebook friends. I probably said something to offend you. If I haven't said anything to offend you, that just did. I just got befriended by 10 people. Let's just be honest. That's our heart. You got to get to this. Jesus cares about your heart. He's like, your heart will do this. It'll make the most awesome things not awesome. It'll make the most pure things impure. It'll make like giving and worship and all that. And guess what? Our culture, the world out there, hates the culture of Christianity. It really does. Well, you got those holier-than-thou attitudes and all that. We don't need a holier-than-thou attitude. You know what we need? A humble holiness. Humility. Not smearing it in people's face and rubbing their nose in or anything like that. Not at all. We need a humility that goes with our holiness. So Jesus says, hey, you get a reward. If you want to be a hypocrite, your reward is people's applause, but it's not going to be enough. It's not going to be enough. See, we serve a living God. If he sees, no one else matters. You have to live with that mantra. If God sees this, great, no one else matters. And God sees everything. No one else matters. There's also a reward for authenticity. Let me show you this one, verse 3. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Again, Jesus doesn't say if you give. Jesus says when you give. So make sure that's very clear. Giving is not to be applauded. It is the minimal standard of just following Jesus. But he talks about this right hand and left hand. Now, most of us here are right-handed. And so that's the action hand. Okay? So what he's saying is like, don't even tell yourself, the left hand, the passive hand, don't even tell yourself what you're doing. Just do it. And so what happens is our heart is so weak. When we do something like, when we give, we really want to pat ourselves on the back. When we serve someone, we want to, attaboy, way to go. And Jesus like, don't even do that. Why? Because that can even cause resentment in us. Did you know that? Like doing good things, if we really overthink it, if it's not natural, can really cause resentment in us. I'll tell you how. The resentment can start when you give. You know what? Maybe you've thought this or said this in your mind. You know what? If we didn't give that much to church, boy, we sure could buy us a new car. Or we'd be out of this financial hole that we're in. Or we'd be able to have that dream vacation that we've been dreaming about. What happens? It made a good thing a not good thing. You know what? If I didn't give up every one of my Sundays to be there to gather with people at Grace Point Church and to be there to serve at Grace Point Church, well, I'd get more sleep. I'd be able to start a new hobby. I'd be able to work on my car. I'd be able to, whatever that is. And so what Jesus is like, no. You need to practice the blessedness of self-forgetfulness. We need to be the most forgetful people there are. Because literally, you understand, Jesus is not talking in literal terms right there, right? I don't know if you can do this or not, but can you write a check with your eyes closed? I don't think you can. Can you get on the computer and give a donation, give your tithe and offering to Grace Point Church doing like this? I don't think you can. So Jesus is not like, okay, right hand, left hand's behind me, they won't see this. It's not that. That's not what Jesus is talking about. Jesus is saying, practice the idea of self-forgetfulness. If you sit and boast and gloat all over the things you do and kind of have your resume like, I do this, it's going to make it an ugly thing. I believe this is what Jesus is talking about. He's telling us, look, when you give, just be intentional, be sacrificial, be loving about it, and just forget yourself. Just forget it. I mean, because when we don't do that, it causes a nasty in us. And then we'll say, you know what, I serve and no one appreciates me. I'm burned out. I give and give and give, and I get nothing back. Now, again, that's poor leadership on our part. We should encourage you and appreciate you, and we work hard on that, but we're imperfect about that. But again, if you're serving an audience of one, it's all about God. It's all about Him. That'll really protect your heart on serving and giving and all those different things like that. I love what John Calvin says. Jesus means that we ought to be satisfied when having God for our only witness. This is when we have God as our only witness. Jesus says there's a reward here. There's a reward. You know what the reward is? The Bible talks about having a reward in heaven. So Christians will be rewarded in heaven. So heaven doesn't get worse. It only gets better. So there's reward there. But you know what I think he's talking about in this text? The reward of genuine love is rewarded when the poor are helped, when the needy are assisted, when the naked are clothed, when the oppressed are free, when the lost, not yet believer and follower of Jesus Christ is found, when churches are planted, when communities come together, when children are taken care of back there, when these seats are filled and people hear the gospel and worship about Jesus. You know what your reward is? Jesus. And people coming to know Jesus, and people loving Jesus, and people being served by that church that knows Jesus and loves Jesus, and a community being drawn together. That's the reward right there. This is the reward. And so we want this to be a natural part of our lives. Like, I just want to see Jesus made much of. And so all the things that I do in life are just a product of that. I just want to see little kids back here be discipled to follow Jesus. That's all I want. I just want to see churches planted in Las Vegas because we need more churches. 1.8 million people here do not go to church, follow Jesus, love Jesus. 1.8. That's the reward that he's talking about. We want that to be natural. See, like Christ follower, if you're new on the journey, or maybe you've been on the journey for a long time, when this becomes, giving and serving becomes natural, it'll guard your heart against boasting about it, against wanting other people to boast about it. It'll guard your heart. It's kind of like driving. You really don't think about driving now, do you? You've been doing it for so long. You think about it. I've got my second teenager driving right now. And great, both my girls are great drivers, but you can notice there's the overcompensation, 10 and 2, and they're holding on for dear life, and the turns aren't as smooth and all that kind of stuff. They're overthinking everything. But you've been driving for a long time. You don't even think, you can drive from the strip here, and you're like, I don't even know how I got home. I've done that. I'm like, I was probably texting. I'm just kidding. I'm gonna get beat up on that one. That'll do it. And the idea is so natural, not my texting, but driving. It's so natural that you just don't think about it. That's what Jesus is talking about. He says, when you do these things, he just means let it be so natural. Why? Because Jesus cares about your heart. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Can I pastor you for just a second? Just allow me to be your pastor for just a minute. What Jesus is talking about here is money and time. That's what he's talking about. I'm not going to talk about money. I'm not going to talk a lot about money. We got a couple of weeks. Jesus is going to talk about your heart. It's kind of tied to money. We'll talk about it then. I'm going to talk about your time. Let's talk about that. You were asked the question today, if you had an extra hour and a half, what would you do with it? Maybe a lot of different things. I think I said something like I wanted to learn how to play an instrument. Yeah, valid thing. You received a card on your way in. It said 1.5. What's that all about? Let me pastor you for just a second. That one, if you pull that card out, that'd be great. You can find it. It's in your worship guide, maybe your pocket or something like that. Pull that up. 1.5. This is about how long our services last, unless I preach way too long. 1.5, an hour and a half is about how long a service lasts. At Grace Point Church, we do this thing called core identities. It's who we are as disciples and followers of Jesus. Let me share with you two of our identities. One of our identities is that we are family. We're a family. God has made us family together. By the blood of Jesus Christ, we're brothers and sisters in Christ. Jesus is our big brother. God is our father. It's a beautiful thing. So we're family. We love one another. One of our other identities is servants. We're a family of servants, that we serve people within the walls of Grace Point Church, and we serve people outside the walls of Grace Point Church. So, in most churches, 80% of the work is done by 20% of the people. Maybe you've been in church for a while, you've heard that statistic. That's a very accurate statistic. Well, Grace Point Church, we're a pretty good serving church. Inside the walls, I say we're about 70% of the work, what needs to be serving, is done by about 30% of the people. We're not there yet. So this is just my heart to you. We're not there yet. We want to grow in serving. We want to be a serving church that serves the family as well, inside the walls. And so that's exactly what that 1.5. And so what we're asking is this. Our heart is for everyone to serve. We're asking, will you give 1.5 hours of your time per week? That's what we're asking for. Or some of you lead community groups. Community groups last about an hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hours, depends on what's going on that night. And so you're serving. We get it. It's awesome. Some of you are serving every once in a while here. That's awesome. We're asking, will you give 1.5 hours of your time to serve the family? Which actually serves friends from the community, because we have a lot of first-time guests come to this place. A lot of people exploring who God is and all that. And so you'll be serving them as well. Will you give an hour and a half? Well, let me tell you, there's benefits to giving an hour and a half. Flip your card over and you'll see these things here. What are the benefits? Well, serving frees me from me. Did you know that? When you serve other people, it frees you from you. Why? We live in a very consumeristic time. Everything is about what I can get out of everything. And so what we've done is we start looking at churches that way. We come to churches and say, you know what? I'm going to shop around and find the right church for me. Nothing wrong with investigating churches. I'm all for that. But if we had the wrong mindset, we shop around, what's in it for me? I want a church that does this way, and they do this way, and this way, that way. I can get all that I want out of it, and we never get anything back to it. And so all I'm asking is, if we change that consumeristic mindset to a contributor. Now, we want to feed you God's word. We want to worship together. We want to serve your children and all. We want to do all of that. But what can you give? What can you give? Can you give an hour and a half? It'll free you from that consumeristic bond, I promise you. What else does it do? Serving grows me as a disciple. Most of us in here, as a follower of Jesus, we want to grow as a disciple, right? I mean, let's just be honest. I want to grow following Jesus. I want to grow like in my walk with Christ. We all want to grow. And so what we think is this. I need another Bible study. Here goes the tweet. Ty's against Bible studies. I'm not against Bible studies. I love the Bible. I study the Bible. I love to study the Bible. But you know, for some of us here, we do not need another Bible study. We have a head full of information and I'll just say it, lazy hands and feet that go along with it. What we need is, in our discipleship process, is to serve other people, to get outside of ourselves. Do you know when you serve other people, you're going to be in there with other people potentially? And other people are as messy as you are, and so there could be a little bit of conflict there, whatever, that we'll allow the gospel to resolve. That's how you grow. There'd be a little, you're a piece of sandpaper, they're a piece of sandpaper, and you're going to rub across, against one another, and it's going to smooth you out. This is a part of the discipleship. Listen to me. You are not growing as a disciple if you're not serving. And some of you are new on your journey. You just need to hear that. And some of you have been on your journey for a long time. It's not guilt hour or anything like that. You've been on the journey for a long time, and you're just not serving. You're like, well, I need to find a place to serve. I need to know what my giftings are. I would say this, jump in anywhere. That's the best way to find out where your giftings are. Jump in anywhere, because you can get in one of our ministries and be like, not for me. Awesome, let's find another one. Because what we want to do is we'll take that passive approach and be like, well, I just don't know what my gift is yet, so I'll just have to wait until I take 10 tests online, and then, the Spirit will tell me where I need to be. Never happens. That's Christianese talk. I get it. I've said it. We all know it, okay? All right. So it grows you as a disciple. And lastly, serving allows me to worship. How is that worship? See, we associate worship with singing in here and all that, which is great, but serving is an act of worship. Jesus came to us from heaven. He says he was at the head of the table with the disciples, got up from the head of the table, took off his outer robe, got down on his knees, and washed their nasty feet. He says, I came to serve. And so we want to reflect God by serving other people and get down on our hands and knees and serve people. Why? We reflect Jesus. That's an act of worship. You're never more like Jesus than when you're serving people. It's a beautiful thing. So here's what we're asking. We're asking you to serve 1.5 hours. Give an hour and a half of your week to serve the family and the friends around this valley, around this community for Jesus. Okay? That's what we're asking for. So here's what I want to do. I want to pray. If you need to make any kind of commitments today, you have a contact card in your hand. You need to sign up to serve. We have Center Point out there. There's kids and tear down and set up and first impressions and community groups and a lot of different areas, sound, audio, video, lights, all that kind of stuff. A lot of different places. Sign up on your contact card and say, I just want to serve. We'll find you a place. We'll help you out. We'll talk through it. Okay, I want to pray for you, and then we'll go to the Lord's table. Father, we love you. Jesus, thank you that you served us, and thank you that you came to us. And Father, I just pray for our hearts. It's so easy for us to be outward in our devotion to you and outward in our service to you and outward in our giving to you. And Father, I pray that you would challenge us on that. I pray, God, you would forgive us for that as well. May we do everything for your name, for your honor, and for your fame, and for your glory, and not our own. Jesus, I pray for our hearts here today as well. I pray that you would help us to take that next step in following you and be servants like you were to us. Jesus, we love you. We thank you. Pray in Christ's name. Amen.